Hello everyone. Shavua Tov, a good week to everyone. So first I'd like to dedicate this video to the Refuah Shlema of Esther Malka Bas Ahava. May she have a immediate and speedy recovery. So tonight we thought to talk about the Kabbalah of fantasy and the Kabbalah of dreams. And we'll see the relationship between fantasy and dreams. And we're going to be discussing a story that appeared in this week's Parshat Vayigash, this Torah portion, talking about Joseph, Torah portion of Vayigash. And here in the Weekly Wonders, there's a pamphlet that is put out by inner.org, INNER.org, from Galenai, my teacher, Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, based on his teachings. And there's a story that's brought. And so I'd like to begin with this story, and we'll discuss this story. So you can subscribe yourself to receive the Weekly Wonders pamphlet, on this inner.org website. Sign up for the email, and you'll get information from the weekly email. So this story is related to a tzaddik, to a holy, righteous person by the name of Rabbi Aaron of Strasselia. He was born in 1766, or in the Hebrew calendar 5526, and he passed away in 5589 in the Hebrew calendar, or 1828. So this story took place somewhere during this rabbi's lifetime. Rabbi Aharon Halevi Horowitz was his full name. And so this story is a very poignant story. There's a lot of lessons from the story, and we're going to discuss some of these lessons. So for the entire write-up, you can read the wonders from this week, or you can message me and I'll send you the PDF. But I'm going to skip straight to the story. So this story is this man is recounting his experience, his story, and then his encounter with this holy tzaddik, this Rabbi Aaron of Strasselia. And through understanding the story, we're going to have some deep mysteries untangled and revealed. So he's recounting this story. In my youth, right after my wedding, this is a person in the story, a person, not the rabbi, this is a person that's recounting this story. In my youth, right after my wedding, we lived with my father-in-law in a village near Shklov. I'm sorry for the pronunciations. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce all these cities, names of cities. My father-in-law rented an old inn that had been uninhabited for 8 years. When we intended to move in, all sorts of rituals were performed there, as old wives would call them. A little distance from the inn house stood an old barn that was considered haunted. It seems to always be these old abandoned barns and mansions. So in this story, it's an old barn, and everyone was careful not to pass before it, even during the day. So this was the legend around town. You don't go near this old barn because it's haunted. I was a scholar of Torah at the time and did not engage in commerce at all. One time, my father-in-law was not home all week and did not return even for the Sabbath, for the Jewish Sabbath. That Saturday night, so this is appropriate, we're reading this story on Saturday night, I smoked a pipe and went out to walk alone until I passed in front of the barn. Suddenly, a black dog came out, circled me 3 times, barked at me, and ran back to the barn. So again, this is the barn that was known to be haunted. This is what people around the town said. So a black dog came out, circled around him 3 times, barked at him, and then the dog ran back to the barn. So you can imagine this. Many stories are like this, right? Many fantasy depictions. You can imagine this taking place in a movie or a TV show. I was very frightened, and with my strength failing me, hardly made it back into the house. They treated me with herbs to revive me and to try and free me from the fear that had set in. So it's very important. They didn't view this as something superstitious initially. The herbs, it seemed from reading this story, the herbs and such were to cure him of the fear, not of the feeling that something superstitious just happened. That something magical or something like that just happened. In this manner the night passed until I lay down to sleep. When I fell asleep, immediately it entered my imagination that 2 men were coming to me. So this is going to be very important. Let's focus on the details of this dream that he's having. One was German, dressed in royal garments, and the other was limping on one leg. They took me by the hands and brought me to a place where an enormous and frightening army stood. The 2 looked like kings in my imagination, each at the head of his army. Between them, a map of the countryside was spread, and they taught me the wisdom of map reading. So if you any good fantasy story, story writer, you have to build a world. It's called a world building. So as part of building that world, you have to have a map. Right? The most famous fantasy writers, they have worlds that are charted out. So too here, you have a map, and you have places on that map. So this is a very important way. You have kings, you have armies, you have maps and worlds. So he's entering a fantasy world. This is his dream. This is what he's dreaming. Believe me, more than 20 years have passed since then. This is as he's recounting this story, this man. And still, if I were to see their faces today, I would recognize them by name and know the exact layout of the map. This repeated every night, knowing that I was trapped in a fantasy world. Sometimes my family lit candles, and my wife sat by my side all night, but to no avail. So what is this like? So it's someone who's trapped in a fantasy world, and there's so many books and movies that depict something like this, where someone is trapped in a fantasy, trapped in a dream, trapped in a fantasy world. There's many portal fantasies, for instance, that are like that. The person has left the real world, the true world, as we like to call it, the world that we think is the world of truth, and the protagonist, is trapped in a fantasy world. So how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that dream state? Maybe even the person is trapped in a dream, and people are surrounding them, trying to wake them up. There's many examples of that in TV shows and movies and books and so forth. When I woke up from sleep, my shirt was so soaked with sweat that you could wring water from it. That's also an important detail. During the days, I was weak and ill. On the following nights, the kings, as I had come to call them, themselves did not come, only their emissaries. And every night they taught me a different skill. Sometimes how to ride a horse, sometimes how to carry loads, sometimes how to draw and shoot a bow. So in this dream world, he was learning skills. He was learning how to make do in this dream world. So this is also an important detail. So hopefully we're going to try to connect things later. But for now, we're just going to read this his account of his dream. And this is, again, a dream that this man, after being, he had this encounter with a black dog that circled him 3 times, that came out of this haunted barn, and then went back into the barn. This dog went back into the barn. And every night thereafter, he's having these dreams, either of these 2 men, each a king of a great army, or they're sending their emissaries, and they have showing him how to read maps, how to read the map of this world. And he's also learning skills. He's learning how to make do in this dream world. So there's many examples of that in movies and fiction. We're gonna discuss one example, because this is an example that has captured people's imagination and attention for the past 35 years. And we're going to explain why we're going to cite one specific example, but there's probably hundreds of similar examples to this. It's called a portal fantasy. But there's many ways to look at that. I did not meet their expectations. If I did not meet their expectations, they would beat me harshly. All the rituals and remedies I tried to break out of the fantasy world did not help. I even turned to sorcerers, but they too could do nothing to help me. So again, before every night he's frantic. He's trying to get out of this trap, because when he falls to sleep, immediately he goes back into the same exact dream world, same exact fantasy. Months passed with me locked in this fantasy world. I began to grow accustomed to it and even found joy in the work I was assigned to do there. I was quite quick in performing my duties there, but during the daytime hours, when I was not in that world, I withered and was sick from the intense night labor. So his world shifted. His main activities, his main occupation was in this fantasy world. It was not in his world where he was married, where he had a life, where he studied Torah, which is to study the Bible. He was so caught up by his imagination, by his fantasy, that he didn't have time, he didn't have energy to actually live. My father-in-law and my father were simple people. They never traveled to rebbes. A rebbe is a leader, a Hasidic leader, a holy man who's the leader of a Hasidic group of disciples, of students. But when they saw how weakened I had become and that my appearance had deteriorated, they said to me, "You must go to Sorry, again with the pronunciation. Strashel Olya. I set out for this city in the evening. Surprisingly, that night on my journey, I had no experience of the fantasy world. I began to entertain the thought that it was traveling that had helped me, and so I turned the horse back from the long road ahead and wanted to return to my father." So he thought maybe it was the fact that he was traveling on the road, maybe this is what helped him to escape his dream state of entering back into the very same fantasy world that he had been dreaming for months. But on the second night, the kings appeared again and treated me as if they had in my home. It was only then that I understood that what the fantasy world and its inhabitants feared was my journey to this city. So I decided to once again turn around and resume my journey. The day I arrived was a non-working day, and all the Hasidim, the followers of this Hasidic Rebbe, and great rabbis were in the large house of our Rebbe, Rabbi Aaron. And we said this is Rabbi Aaron Halevi Horowitz. So Rabbi Avram Shenis of Sklav and the rabbis of Dubrovna and many others were waiting for our Rebbe to come out of his room. I poured out my bitter heart before Bear, our Rebbe's attendant. I gave him a gift, and he brought me into the room. When I entered, our Rebbe was just removing his tefillin from his prayers, his morning prayers. I approached him, and he was smoking his pipe. He looked at me and asked, "What do you want? What are you asking?" I told him everything. When I finished, I raised my eyes and saw that his face was burning like torches. The pipe fell from his hand, and he rose from his chair, running back and forth in the room, rubbing his forehead vigorously with his right hand, calling out, "How does a blemish reach the soul?" So we had pity on this man. He felt so terrible for this man that he was caught up in this fantasy that was taking over his life for months. When I saw his anguish, I wept bitterly from the sorrow in my heart. So what was this man's anguish, as Rabbi Ginsburg explains? It was the anguish of seeing his Rebbe, his teacher, his mentor, his spiritual guide in pain. Because this man said himself that he was getting used to even finding joy in this fantasy world. It's like you play a game long enough, you read books long enough, and you start enjoying this fantasy realm, and you want to maybe even look forward to going back into the same fantasy realm, written by the same authors, to watch the movies again and again, to read the books again and again, to read every single book from this author who is recounting different stories, different developments in this fantasy realm. So this is what this man felt. But his mentor, his teacher, his Rebbe, was crying bitterly in anguish over this man losing his connection with the world, and blemishing his soul, because the soul comes down to a body for a specific purpose, for a mission. And this man was someone who studied Torah, someone who was connecting to God in his life. And yet he was all of what was happening was that he was getting more and more caught up in this fantasy realm, and losing his connection to his wife, to his family, to his world, to the world. So when I saw his anguish, I wept bitterly from the sorrow in my heart. There was no one in the room but us. I saw him rubbing his forehead so hard that his blood was about to spatter on the wall. His teacher was in such pain and anguish over this man. He circled like this for about 10 or 15 minutes. Afterwards, he approached me and asked, "Do you say Shema Yisrael?" This is the prayer where we acknowledge the oneness of God throughout all of creation. I answered through my tears, "Yes." The Rebbe asked, "Do you understand its meaning?" Then our Rebbe explained to me the meaning of the word one. And God is one, in such simple language that it established faith in my heart that God is one, and his kingdom is one everywhere. These words are engraved to me to this day, as if I heard them yesterday. Then he gave me rituals to perform, which I will not reveal. He instructed me to read from a holy book before sleep, and he told me, "Review the things I tell you all day until they are fluent in your mouth, even at night." He also instructed me to say to the destructive forces when they come, "The Rebbe said you should not bother me. The Rebbe said you will be judged if you bother me." Afterwards, he comforted me and said they would not frighten me anymore. Outside, the Hasidim, the followers of this Rebbe, and rabbis were already waiting, wondering why our Rebbe was delayed. Our Rebbe sensed this, opened the door, and signaled for them to go. Everyone was amazed at his long conversation with me. When I came out, they wanted to know what he had spoken with me about, but I did not reveal the content of the conversation. When I returned home, I did everything our Rebbe commanded. At night, I lay down to sleep after reading from Ein Yaakov, which is a book of stories from the Talmud. As I dozed off, I saw again in a vision the two men from the first time, not their messengers this time, but the two men themselves. So it's a very important detail. They stood far away, motioning for me to come with them. I told them the Rebbe's words. The German, who always looked like a good person, immediately retreated and said nothing. The lame one stomped his foot, gnashed his teeth, and shouted, Who is the Rebbe that I should listen to him? I repeated our Rebbe's words again, and they stood far away, afraid to approach, for about a quarter of an hour. Then they tried to speak with me in a kind tone. They promised to make me a king of nightmares, and many other things. But I repeated our Rebbe's words again and again. Finally, they became angry and made a commotion, knocking on the house door until everyone in the house heard, and then disappeared. I woke to the sound of knocking and told my family that there was nothing more to fear. So what is this like? How do we approach a story like this? I know this was a long story, and whoever is sticking around to this Kabbalah class, I appreciate it. But there's some very important lessons, and I think I felt it was important to read the entire story. What's happening is that more and more this young man, is entering a world where the rulers of this world are two men. One who is nice and kind, and one who is not. And he's more and more leaving the world, like people that are addicted to games, to gaming, and to books, and you can forget to eat and drink. More and more to enter into a fantasy realm. And a person could feel themselves to learn, be more interested in learning the rules of that fantasy world than in interacting and engaging in the real world. So there's many stories like that, but what we want to see is what the Rebbe focused on first. What was the Rebbe anguished by? Not that this man was losing strength and getting weak. Perhaps that was the impetus for this man to come to his Rebbe, to come to his teacher. But what the Rebbe was anguished and pained by was this blemish that was affecting the very man's own soul. Because from the perspective of this man, he came to the Rebbe because he was physically weaker and exhausted, but he was learning to enjoy this imaginative world. Like anyone who goes and sees movies and books, fantasy worlds can be very enjoyable, but to a limit, right? You see that this is becoming your life. It's taking over. So for this man, it was just exhausting him, and it was taking away from his ability to do anything ultimately in the world. But still, he saw it as I'm weak, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I'm doing so much in this fantasy realm. But it wasn't that he didn't enjoy the fantasy realm, that he wasn't finding enjoyment in it. He was learning skills, but he was just physically worn out. But from the Rebbe's perspective, his focus was that you're fooling yourself. You think you're enjoying that fantasy realm, that's that's a sickness. You're not healthy. Because your soul came down into the world to do something, has a specific mission and purpose in the world. And you're feeling that you can enjoy something in the fantasy realm, that's not good. That's not healthy. So the start of this becoming rectified, like we use the term rectified, what does that mean? The start of escaping the fantasy realm is to realize that it's not about the body being weaker. So to imagine, to go through these experiences of this young man, but have the focus not be on the weakness of the body. So we just have been reading about the story of Joseph in the Bible, in the Torah. And Joseph was the consummate dream interpreter, right? So some things in the world beg for an interpretation. So as we started off, there's something that has been such an interest, such a focus, a movie for the past 35 years. Every year, around this time of year, coinciding with the time when we're reading about Joseph, the consummate dream interpreter. For 35 years, people are watching this movie. And if it's not the number one movie during this time of year, it's close to the number one movie. For 35 years. And you're wondering, what's going on? Why do people keep on returning to this movie again and again and again? And we want to understand something deeper, according to Kabbalah, like a deep mystery, a way to interpret, like we're talking about Joseph, to interpret this movie, this fantasy world being depicted in this movie. And so first, we want to, why are we reading the story of this man who was entered into this fantasy realm with two men? Because the first thing that you would imagine that would be something that would be very very marketable, something that a story that people would like, a fantasy story that people would like, would be a depiction of a young man who had energy, that he wasn't affected physically. Because again, what did the Rebbe say in the story? That he was pained over the blemish in the man's soul, not the fact that he was tired, not the fact that he was exhausted. So you would imagine someone who was encountering two men, that's his world. He's entering a world that he's entering a realm where he's left his family behind, and it's between him and two men. But he's not exhausted, and he's able to confront these two men. That's like at the end of the story. He's yelling he has the power to yell at these two men to get them to go away. So even though his family cares about him, right, in this story, his wife and his father-in-law, his family is surrounding him, trying to get him out of this dream. His whole family cares about him, but he's home alone with two men. So maybe you figured it out. What movie are we talking about? So you have a boy who wishes, like if you're wishing for something, that means you want to dream about something. He's wishing that his family would just disappear. So that's like entering a dream state, entering a fantasy. He's wishing that his family would just disappear. And then he wakes up. Mom, Dad, everyone disappeared. He got his wish. He's now in the dream. His dream has come true. But in that dream, he has to confront the two men. And they're called the wet bandits. What did we see wets in our story? Every morning, every day that he's waking up from this dream, this young man he's drenched. So much so that he can wring out his clothing, and he's drenched in sweat. And he wrings out his clothing, and it's filled. So it's the wet bandits. These two men are causing you to sweat. But what do we see here? What do we see about Kevin? He's not exhausted. He's not tired. It's like at the end of the story that he's able to yell at them to go away, to yell at these two men to go away. And so Kevin does all sorts of things to get these two men to go away. But what does the Rebbe say to this young man? The Rebbe said, "You should not bother me." The Rebbe said, "You will be judged if you bother me." So one of the men is nice and one of the men is not nice. The same thing with Kevin. That Marv, nice Daniel Stern, nice, and then Joe Pesci, not so nice, right? Good cop, bad cop. That's how it's depicted in the movie. That one is nice and the other is not nice. The same thing is in this story. So Kevin, the way to understand Home Alone is that maybe his family was there the entire time. Maybe they didn't go to France. Maybe they didn't go on the plane. Maybe they were there surrounding him the entire time, and he was dreaming the entire movie. And then finally he woke up, and then lo and behold, his family is there. Maybe his family never left, never went anywhere. He just woke up. And in his dream, there was these two men. Because that would fit perfectly, again, like we're trying to understand not what the writers had in mind, not what the actors had in mind, not what the producers had in mind. We're trying to understand why for 35 years people are so enthralled by this story, and why they want to watch the story around the time of Joseph. Because it's a dream that it's in need of interpretation. For 35 years, people are waiting for an interpretation for this dream. And what's the interpretation of this dream? Is that it's teaching us how to wake up from living a life of a dream, of a fantasy. That this world that we're living in is called an olam, a world of falsehood, olam hasheker, a world of dreams, a world of fantasy. And then we're all seeking to wake up and to live our lives as it's called to live in a redemptive state, to live a life, to see the world like a tzaddik, like a holy, righteous individual sees the world, as a world that's connected to God, and that I'm connected to my life mission and purpose. So if you're living in an awakened state, then that's great. But sometimes you're caught up in a fantasy, so you have to come to your Rebbe, you have to come to the tzaddik, to the righteous individual who has that connection with God and can teach you how to have that connection with God, and can teach you not to be pained over the whatever physical things you're going through, but it could teach you that the greatest anguish, the greatest thing is if we're not fulfilling our life mission and purpose. That's the greatest thing that we should be troubled by in our lives. So what's the lesson? Why is Home Alone, for an example? Why is this? Why are people so enthralled by this, so taken by this for 35 years? It's because it's a great metaphor. The symbolism is wonderful. You have a house that you are scared of, just like in the story. You have a haunted place that's haunted, but you realize everything's okay. Everything's fine. The old man that lived in the house, he's a sweet man. He just wants to see his granddaughter. You realize that everything's fine. You have this boy, he's left alone. He figures it out. He's okay. He's not exhausted. He's not tired. He's able to take care of the situation. Like this young man in the story. He's able to yell at them, go away. The Rebbe says that you're going to be judged. So the two men in the two people in the story, the two kings in the story, they leave. He's able to, the young man in the story is able to wake up from the dream, and Kevin in Home Alone is able to wake up. He's able to properly confront these two men and to wake up, and there he's surrounded by his family soon after. So what is, this really speaks to everything, to fiction, to fantasy, to dreams. Is that some things, some dreams you just forget about, you just move on with your life. But if maybe there's a fantasy, maybe there's some fantasy writer, and something is gripping you. You read book after book, or you read the books over and over again. You see the movies over and over again. There's something that's gripping you. You've memorized the entire map of this entire fictional world. You know where everything is. Maybe you can even speak the language of the world. You've learned all there is to know about this world. You come to the holy tzaddik, to a Joseph type person in this world, and they said, no, the fact that you're finding joy in this world is that's causing a great anguish, because your soul was coming down into this world in order to do something, in order to fulfill the mission and purpose in this world. So you can learn very great lessons. Like Home Alone, it's a great metaphor. It's a great story, great symbolism there. But eventually you have to wake up and live your life. Okay, and that's the lesson that Kevin learns in the end. Eventually you don't want for your family to disappear. You realize that you want to be around your family, because that's the real world. You want the two men to disappear. So, everyone have a good week filled with living in this world, fulfilling our mission and purpose. And again, a speedy and immediate refuah shlema for Esther Malka Bas Ava. And we should all know that we shall be able to fulfill our mission, our purpose in life, in health and happiness.